What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast network and channel. Giving a shout out to the rest of the crew: Shy, Kelvin, Jermaine, Kobe, Brian, Film Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right. That's right. If everyone who's tuning in, we hope that you support Behind the Bench, become a subscriber, help make this show the best that it can be. And for those who have become subscribers, you're definitely helping in achieving that goal. No doubt about it. Now, this is a brief video. I'll keep it within 10 to 15 minutes because I know it's early weekend and people got other things to do. I get that, man. But, since the summer of 2018, when most people, pundits, or fans of this all-time story franchise were thrilled and elated that LeBron James was being brought to this team, there's no way in the world they could ever foresee or fathom the things that would transpire since this player sported that uniform, the purple and gold. Now, for me, there's been reports over the past couple of days, over the past 2 days, particularly after the Lakers defeated the Boston Celtics in Beantown, that there is a high probability that the Lakers are going to trade LeBron James. And my first reaction was in similar fashion to when fans celebrated him being brought to the team. My first thoughts were, man, if they make this move and they trade him, I'm going to celebrate to the high heavens. And see, this is not personal, man. This is what his fans have to understand. When LBJ conducted his first stint with the Cleveland Cavaliers, when he was drafted in 2003, right? Nobody really had an issue with LeBron James. I didn't have an issue with LeBron James. Why would I? He's a young player starting out. Okay, I know there was a lot of anticipation and excitement about him entering the NBA. There was a lot of publicity surrounding him. Okay, we've seen that before. Although this was at a higher level than what was accustomed to, particularly for an athlete, a basketball player who didn't play on the collegiate level, right? Like when Shaquille O'Neal was drafted into the league, or a Patrick Ewing, or someone like a Ralph Sampson. Because actually, prior to the entry of high school players, then one and done players, the most highly touted players entering the NBA that are most anticipated were big men. It was centers. Like I mentioned, Shaquille O'Neal, Patrick Ewing, Ralph Sampson, Brad Daugherty, Purvis Ellison. I can go down the line. Derek Coleman, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Moses Malone. Well, Moses Malone was a high school player. And I believe Moses Malone was the first high school player to ever be drafted into the NBA, I believe. I'm just giving a little backdrop. But no one had an issue with LeBron James during his first 7 years. Now, you could tell they were trying to make him the face of the league, but, there's other players they attempted to do that with prior to his entry into the league. No big deal. See, those things, it's not a big deal. And as a fan of the league, and considering that the city of Cleveland had not experienced a sports championship since the Cleveland Browns of the 1960s, with Jim Brown leading the way along with quarterback Otto Graham. And Cleveland is a great sports town. So I'm trying to convey that even if you weren't a fan of the Cleveland Cavaliers, there were a lot of basketball fans out there who said, including myself, who said, man, if LeBron James was ever able to lead, this is doing his first run. If he was able to lead Cleveland to a championship, be one of the greatest stories in history of the NBA. I said, man, that would be an awesome story. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, Cleveland's a great sports town. They've had some great teams up there over the years. Cleveland Browns, the former, the baseball team in Cleveland. The Cleveland Cavaliers of the late 80s, early 90s, they had darn good teams. Magic Johnson predicted by the late 80s that the Cleveland Cavaliers would become the team in the 90s. And then Michael Jordan shut that down in 80. He shut that down in 89 with the shot over Craig Elo. But nobody had an issue with LeBron James. There wasn't really any resentment towards him. This is what his fans got to understand. And see, because of the decisions that he's made throughout his career over the past 15 years, his fans always have to defend his actions. And it created a round of apologists on these sports shows that consistently reacted to the criticism by justifying everything that he did. And it created an environment that Kevin Durant alluded to some 5 years ago when he said the environment surrounding him is toxic. Well, that wasn't the case prior to the decision of the summer 2010, when he said, I'm taking my talents down to South Beach to join forces. That's what he said the day of the decision that was set on that day in 2010, July 2010. So therefore, when you say join forces, that means you're not joining forces with reserve players or role players. Or all-stars. He talking about superstars, superstar franchise players. That's where the resentment began. That's where the backlash began. Because and when you really get down to it, it wasn't the outside fans who engineered the initial backlash. It was his own fans in Cleveland. Remember when he returned back to Cleveland and played his first game at Quickens Arena as a Miami Heat? The reaction, it was so visceral, as Reggie Miller said during the telecast of that game between the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers. You can literally cut the tension with a knife, with a butter knife. Like, as soon as he ran through the tunnel at center court, I'd never heard vitriol like that. Like it wasn't like, where someone boos a villain, like Bill Laimbeer. He casted himself as a villain for the Detroit Pistons because he said he was taking pressure off the rest of his teammates. He didn't mind being booed by on the road by fans of the opponent. He didn't mind that. But this was something different. This was on a whole different level. And from the moment he ran out that tunnel, pregame warm-ups, tip-off, first half, second half, every time he touched the ball, he was booed. I mean, it wasn't even a boo. It was something that there's not even a word to describe in the dictionary for that. So it wasn't the outside basketball fans who initially reacted that way. It was his very own fans in Cleveland. Because we never seen a superstar such as LeBron James. And see, the thing is, when fans show resentment towards his actions over the past 15 years, nobody's never said he's not a superstar. That's where the resentment comes in. It's not like a role player going from team to team. We're talking about a superstar franchise player who not only left his team to join forces with two other superstars, he joined forces with another top 5 player and a top 10 talent, but he left a team that was winning 60 plus games in consecutive seasons. We've never seen that before in the NBA. We've really never seen that before in any of the other major professional sports leagues. And not only were the team winning 60 games, but they were favored to win the championship both years in 09 and 010. So if a team is winning 60 plus games, the front office is doing more than enough to add the pieces around their star player to pursue a championship, especially when you're favored. The only time a superstar left a team or requested a trade is if their team is bad. Like a Charles Barkley. He played his first years with the Philadelphia 76ers. He entered the league the same year as Jordan, the same year as Akeem Olajuwon, the same year as John Stockton, one of the greatest draft classes of all time in league history. Okay. By the time he finished his 8th season with Philadelphia, Philadelphia was a below 500 team. They was winning like 34, 35 games. They had maxed out the season prior. During the 89-90 season, when he really should have won league MVP, when he led them to the Atlantic Division title, winning like 53, 54 games, right? So when he requested a trade, fans in Philadelphia didn't show resentment because they understood the situation. So when he went on to play for the Phoenix Suns, whenever he returned back to Philadelphia, the fans gave him a standing ovation. They didn't boo him. Same thing with Kevin Garnett. When Kevin Garnett accepted that trade to the Boston Celtics, I was preparing for the 2007-2008 season. Well, the Minnesota Timberwolves peaked in 2004 when KG won league MVP and led his team to the Western Conference Finals. So the fans of Minnesota didn't show no resentment because they understood the situation. So whenever he would return back to Minnesota to play in front of that home crowd as a Boston Celtic, he got a standing ovation. You see what I'm saying? So when he left Cleveland, and I'm not trying to rehash old feelings, I'm just trying to show his fans why the resentment has continued year after year after year after year after year since he left Cleveland, because a superstar is not supposed to do that. It's not like Cleveland would have bottomed out, after winning consecutive 60 win seasons. I believe they eventually would have, broke through and won a championship. But apparently he didn't believe that, because either two things. Either he felt that he needed multiple superstars to win, or he felt that he wasn't capable of leading a conventional team to a championship, which actually both scenarios really align with each other. It's one of the two. It's one of the two. Okay, so NBA fans who show resentment towards LeBron James for starting this trend, because he started it. Now, pundits and fans in retrospect will try to say, well, he only followed the pattern after the Boston Celtics when they traded for KG and Ray Allen. But the difference is they traded for KG and Ray Allen, and KG and Ray Allen were past their prime, and KG and Ray Allen were playing on bad teams. Paul Pierce was playing for a Boston Celtics team that hadn't been to the playoffs in 3 years. And he was 30. And at that time, when they were traded for by Danny Ainge, who was the president of the Boston Celtics at that time, I don't recall anyone referring to Boston as a super team. Did they have a big three? Yes, they had a big three. But we've seen a lot of teams that had quote unquote big threes, but were not a super team. The Milwaukee Bucks of the late 90s, early 2000s, when they had big dog Glenn Robinson, when they had Ray Allen, Sam Cassell, right? Who was originally drafted by the Houston Rockets, right? Ray Allen was drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks. So nobody joined forces in that situation. Okay, Kareem, okay. Bird, McHale, Parrish. Yes, they was a big three, but that wasn't a super team because Kevin McHale was drafted by the Boston Celtics. And during his first 2 years, he had very little contribution to the team offensively. So the Kevin McHale that we remember in his peak during by the mid 80s, like 85, 86, throughout. Well, that wasn't the same McHale that started his career. Robert Parrish was traded for it. Nobody really considered Robert Parrish. He was an all-star, but he wasn't a superstar. You see what I'm saying? He was not considered a franchise player. Kevin McHale wasn't considered like a franchise player. Although he's one of the all-time great powerful. He may have the best post moves of all time. But game in and game out, as far as who's going to carry the team as the lead player, that was not Kevin McHale. That was not Robert Parrish. Showtime. Magic, Kareem, Worthy. That was a big three. But by the time Magic was drafted by the Lakers, Kareem was on the second half of his career. And by the time the mid-'80s arrived, Kareem was a lesser player and he was past his prime. He was older. He was in his late 30s. Worthy was an all-star player, but he was never, by that standard back then in the 80s, he was not considered a superstar. Right? The Detroit Pistons. I'm just trying to think of other teams where you had three players. Run TMC, Golden State Warriors of the early 90s. Chris Mullin, Mitch Richmond, Tim Hardaway, who created the UTEP two-step crossover move. They was a heck of a trio. One of the best offensive trios in basketball, but they were not considered a super team. They was a big three. Okay. So he completes his first. He completes the 4 years in Miami on the super team, unprecedented. That's why he said not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7. Because he thought he was going to run the table. It was set. They was trying to set the table. They were trying to set up for him to run the table. That's where the resentment came in because other superstars had to really get it done. They had to go through the attrition. Even when Bird had McHale and Parrish, Bird had to go through the attrition. Thus, he suffered them back injuries. You see what I'm saying? That curtailed his career, where his career was cut short. Magic Johnson, even though he had Kareem and Worthy, Magic Johnson had to go through attrition, leading Showtime as the point guard, leading that fast break year after year after year, where he had injuries to his knees, man. It wasn't like, man, it wasn't like he was a free ride. That's not what that was. Okay, even the Detroit Pistons, the three guard lineup, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Vinnie Johnson, they had to go through that attrition. They was not considered a super team. You see what I'm saying? Like Isaiah, Joe Dumars, and Vinnie Johnson weren't three franchise players joining forces. You see? And this is why the commentary today really need to break this down to identify what's what. You know, what's a franchise player? What's a superstar? What's a marquee player? What's an all-star? A high-level role player? You know what I'm saying? A reserve player. That needs to all be redefined again and get back to basics. Okay, so, you know, if you trying to halfway be understanding about what he did, okay, you can say, okay, all right, man, he was out there, man, he went out there for a minute, man, and you know, you try to get him benefit of the doubt, right? But he kept on doing it. See, that's the problem. Once he understood that he could manipulate the system and learn how to, you know, manipulate the cap, exploit the cap to, you know, and then flip young talent around and bring in superstars. Well, at that point, it seemed like it consumed him, and he just said, "I'm gonna just keep on doing this," because by that point, he wasn't really being criticized for it no more, especially when he returned back to Cleveland. Now, if he returned back to Cleveland just for the sake of doing it, when he said, "I'm going to mentor the young guys," well, the track record says otherwise when he was down there in Miami. So he went back to Cleveland, and we never seen a player selected the number one pick in a draft traded for a superstar. We never seen that. Andrew Wiggins, the number one pick out of University of Kansas, who maybe if he was developed like he was drafted to, playing alongside with Kyrie Irving, then Cleveland, maybe he's a better player today than what he wound up being. So he got traded to a Timberwolves team where they had, at that point, it was almost like they was in limbo because their best player, who was a top 10 talent, he was top 3 in PER at the time when he was traded to Cleveland, and Kevin Love. This is a guy who was averaging 26 and 15. The best offensive rebounder in basketball was Kevin Love. The best outlet passer in basketball was Kevin Love. The first player since Moses Malone to score 30 points and grab 30 rebounds in the same game. Kevin Love was a beast. And arguably, he was better. I believe offensively, he was better than Chris Bosh, who was a top 10 talent himself. I believe he was a better three-point shooter and better offensive rebounder than Anthony Davis. That's how good Kevin Love was. Okay, so you form a second super team. You say, okay, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. And then fans will say, well, that team up there was not a super team in Cleveland. But if you look at the metric, they had more offensive firepower and elite three-point shooters on that Cleveland team than down there in Miami. The Miami Heat super team had about 5 to 6 three-point shooters that were elite level. Well, in Cleveland, he had 6 or 7, especially after they traded and got Kyle Korver, who at the time when they traded Kyle Korver, he was the most prolific three-point shooter of the decade until Steph Curry moved past him and eventually became the all-time shooter when it comes to three-point attempts made. Right? Okay. So apparently there's a pattern that was beginning to take shape since 2010, where we were deeply entrenched in the super team era, right? And then it seemed like once all the assets were exhausted in one place, he would move on to the next place. So this is why I was so disappointed as a fan of the Lakers when they brought him to the team, because I knew exactly what, and other Laker fans who followed his whole career knew what he was going to do. As one of his associates said, the primary reason why he decided to come to the Lakers was because at that time in 2018, there are a lot of teams that had exhausted their cap space. Right? The Lakers had something that no other team in the NBA had. You had some teams who had a plethora of young talent. You had some teams that had open cap space. There's some teams that had multiple draft picks. The Lakers had all three elements. They had all three levels of capital for him to come in and do exactly what he did. To try to form, well, not try to form, but form a super team. And he's done it since he's been on the Lakers. He's done it on more than one occasion. At the expense of the deepest, most versatile young core that the league has ever witnessed by a team who drafted those players over a 4-year stretch. Now they're all gone. And what perplexes me is not one of those players was good enough to remain on the team since he's been associated with the franchise. No, their talent level or the so-called lack thereof had nothing to do with it. By the time he was brought to the team, they were looked at nothing more than assets to flip around and to bring in one desired player after the next. And that's why I've done so many videos about the young core. That's why I've supported the young core and do so with happiness, because all I'm doing is being a natural fan and supporting the real players that was drafted to represent this franchise long term in the future. And ever since they've been let go, traded off, or whatever you want to call it, sacrificed, sliced and diced, this franchise has been struggling. And it all they gave up all of that for one season, one brief moment in 2020. It's a trade-off for the ages. Now, fans that this guy may not consider it pertinent or cause for concern, but for actual fans of this team to overlook the significance of what has transpired over these past 6 years and to think that somehow that they still gonna roll, it's impossible, because sooner or later, when you mortgage everything off like that, you gotta pay the bill, or as they say, you gotta pay the piper. Now, if people are ready to pay the piper, then good luck, because there's nothing to pay with, because it's all been exhausted. So, with this news being leaked, reported on yesterday about him being traded, I had instant joy, because they need to put an end to this, man. This franchise has been, if you open up a refrigerator, like, let me put it this way, you go grocery shopping and you buy a month's supply of groceries, like we tend to do, like when we go like big time grocery shopping, we shop to supply the refrigerator with a month's full of food, and the cupboard too, and your kitchen cabinets. Well, if you eat all of that in a week's time, but your budget only allows you to go big time grocery shopping on a monthly basis, then you're going to be hungry a lot of days, and you're going to be resorting to eating what you really don't want to eat. What I mean by that is, instead of eating a full course meal, you may be resorting to chipping off of snacks. You know what I mean? Like crackers or whatnot. And spread some peanut butter over the top of that bad boy and call it a day. Well, that's where we at. And it's all because the franchise mortgages itself off to help this guy win, to prove that he can lead us to the promised land. But it wasn't like he came here on his own and led who was already there. No. At the expense of the most talented young core I've ever seen in professional basketball, there's been one attempt after another. You're pulling food from the refrigerator at the rate of a locomotive. And now when you open up that refrigerator door, all you see are the racks. All you see are the racks. You may see a carton of milk standing there, but that's not a gallon of milk. That's a carton of milk. Where you have to shake it to hear the milk rattling at the bottom of the carton. And you may see some empty eggshells. I'm serious, man. I'm serious. And maybe 1-2 slices of bologna. And if you open up the freezer, it is cold, and all you got is some filled up ice trays. That's where we're looking at. So if he's traded, I'm gonna be elated, man. It's gonna be a relief, and he can move on. Because for all practical purposes, he should be playing in his hometown in Cleveland. I don't think he never should have left. Me personally. And we've been having this problem, and he would never have the criticism other than the normal criticism of an athlete. You know, can they lead a team to a championship, or how many, just the usual, how long can he keep this going? Just the usual stuff. Just the usual stuff. Then you can have an appropriate comparison to the players that they're trying to compare him to. See? But when you manipulate the system, go from team to team and stack the deck and form super teams, realistically, you cannot compare him to the guy they're trying to push him past. You cannot compare him to a player who repped the Laker franchise for 20 seasons. And often did it during his absolute prime on an undermanned team. You can't do that realistically, man. And that's why I'd be glad when this is all over. They need to move on from him, because the longer he's in that uniform, there's going to be pressure by his fan support, the pundits, and even fans who were led to buy into this, for the Lakers to just gouge out the franchise to try to make one more push. That's why they need to put an end to it. And that's why I would be elated when I hear those words that he's not on the team no more. It's nothing personal. This is what his fans got to understand. If he would have conducted himself like every other superstar of the past, I'm not even saying that you have to play your whole career for one team. We've seen plenty of superstars that have played for more than one team in their career. Will Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He played the majority of his career for the Lakers, but he did play for the Milwaukee Bucks for the first 4 or 5 years of his career. So he played for 2 franchises, right? We're not saying that. Shaquille O'Neal played for more than one team in his career. But what we are saying is, when you're playing on multiple teams to manipulate the system to gain an unfair advantage, that's where it does a disservice to the history of the game. And it slights those superstars from the past who had to really get out there and get it done, win or lose. See, Patrick Ewing played the majority of his career for the New York Knicks until he got old, and they did move on from him, and he wound up, he played for the Sonics, for a brief moment, and then I believe he finished his career with the Orlando Magic. But the hardest career was with the New York Knicks. He never won a championship. But man, he's a respected figure in the league because they called him the Warrior. He was the ultimate warrior. And he deserved to win a championship. But Michael Jordan was always in the way. So you can live with the result if it's real and if it's genuine and if the determination of who's better is strictly based on real, full competition. You can live with the results. Whenever the Lakers lost in the finals or in the playoffs, if I know it's real, I can roll with it and accept it and say, hey, y'all were the better team. Just go around. You see what I'm saying? But he chose a route that caused and has created a lot of mayhem, a lot of chaos, and forcing teams to make moves they normally wouldn't be making. Because there's no way in the world, if the Lakers had not brought him to this franchise, that they would have gave up their young core. There's no way in the world they would have did it. They wouldn't have to overhaul the roster every year. The franchise would be more stable, their future would be more intact, and the team would be better than what's out there right now, and they would have a better record every year after the year of the bubble. Guaranteed. So if he's wind up being traded, or whenever that moment comes when he's no longer associated with this team, I'm going to be so elated, man. It's going to feel like we won a championship. I'm just being honest. I'm just being real. The gig is up. The gig has been up. I don't believe they should have brought him to the team, especially during the time that they brought him. Number one, because he was 34 years old. And number two, because I was so looking forward to watching that young core grow and develop together. That would have been a treat to me. That would have been a joy. Would it have taken longer? Yes, but it would not have taken longer is what fans would have been led to believe. Because you see all these other teams out here getting it done. OKC, prior to last season when they finished 40-42, the previous two seasons, their record was like, they was winning like 23, 24 games. Boom, look at them right now. And I believe as of this moment, as of today, they're in first place in the Western Conference. That's a testimony to patience, understanding what players to bring to your team, allowing those players to grow together, and you rally around your top player. And they just getting started, man. Minnesota, same thing. New Orleans Pelicans, they came back and won a big game last night. They growing as a team. And sure, when you're starting off with young players, there are going to be moments where you're going to be frustrated and say, man, we could have got that game. But the reason you're frustrated is because of the fact that young core was awesome and they were this close to winning. It wasn't like they was getting blown out. And like I said, that young core that we had, they finished the season with a point differential of -1 out of 82 games. -1. Look at all these lesser teams, and you look at the standings right now and see all these lesser teams that starting up, and look at their point differential. They got a point differential by like -5, -6, -7. We had a point differential -1, a 10th ranked defense throughout the majority of the season, one of the top scoring benches in the league, and once Lonzo Ball really got going, he didn't turn the ball over a lot, and he helped generate the fastest pace of any team in the league. That team was ahead of the curve. All we had to do was see it through. But when they brought this dude to the team, that was all she wrote in that regard. So it just shows that everything that they've done went against the grain of their best interest as an organization to appease him. And it's not working. And it's not going to work. So if he's traded, preferably back to his home team, it's a win-win for everybody. And then we can move forward. And I'm going to be jumping cartwheels. I'm just being honest, man. This has been very difficult to watch because you knew how it was going to wind up. Because all you had to do was add a piece to the puzzle of what went down over the previous 8 seasons before they brought him to the team. So I just wanted to drop that nugget. And until next time, this is JB for BTB Behind the Bench.